I am so excited to be here. We're surrounded by like some extraordinary people, and we're going to be talking not only about what are the fundamental problems, but how do we actually translate them to practice? So we have here 3 panelists who are basically working at different stages of health and discovery. So my name is Manolis Kellis. I'm a professor at MIT in this little thing called the AI lab, CSAIL. I don't know if you guys have heard about AI. It's this new little thing. So we are focusing in my lab on understanding the mechanistic basis of disease, on understanding how biology works, understanding the circuitry, understanding genetic variation, because that gives us causality, and how we can take genetic variants associated with disease and understand through their wiring where we should intervene therapeutically. So we are basically going from genetics to genomics to circuitry and eventually to targets. And right now with generative AI and large language models and protein language models, we're trying to bridge that last gap of how do we understand the structure of proteins, the structure of chemistry, how do we blend that with human English language so that we can speak the language of chemistry and proteins, and how do we deliver that in a precision medicine way, which requires understanding the diversity and the heterogeneity of patients and how to deliver all of that in a healthcare system. So I'd like the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Great. I'm Andy Beck, the co-founder and CEO at PathAI. Prior to that, I trained as a pathologist. So that's the practice of specialty within medicine that's responsible for the diagnosis of disease. So we're very much focused on how we can use AI to improve diagnosis of disease, both in the US as well as globally.
Hi, Sam Sunai. I was class of 2012. I have some representatives over there from our class. Brought my own people to feel warm. I am a co-founder and head of machine learning at Dino Therapeutics, which is a company that tries to help people who have a genetic disease get treatments that are not currently available. Your body is made up of many cells of different types, and all of them have the same blueprint, their DNA, that makes your body, but each one of them uses a different part of that blueprint. And sometimes part of that blueprint is missing, and like a page from a book that's missing. And if you wanted to cure a disease that is resultant from that missing page, you want to be able to deliver the healthy version of that page to the right cells and nowhere else. This is an unsolved problem. We've been working on it for 50 years as a scientific community. But with the advent of AI, we now have the opportunity to make the carriers of these genes that need to go in different parts of the body become very specific. We use a harmless virus that doesn't cause any disease, modify it with AI, and then make it go into different parts of the body. So I'm excited to tell you more about that today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sadek. I'm principal machine learning scientist at Overjet. It's familiar, the Overjet name is because Varda just get rewarded for the rising star of this MIT conference, so that's great. And at Overjet, what we are trying to do is we are trying to improve the patient outcome and improve the oral health of the patient using the AI and using the all different imperfect representation of the targeted object, the tooth, and use all those information together, ask them to talk to each other, and then create the treatment plan for the patient and provide the better diagnosis accuracy and improve the outcome of the patient.
All right, so Andy, we're going to start with you. So we heard throughout the day how ChatGPT is basically replacing humans, and how humans are not going to be needed anymore. What we're going to do is just write some prompts, or maybe that's not exactly what we said. But quite provocatively, can ChatGPT help with medical diagnosis? If you look at an image, can you simply say, hey, find the tumor? Is it sort of way more complex than that? So how do large language models blend with convolutional neural networks, vision transformers? What are the architectures necessary, and how does it go far beyond language?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing we always think about is we're very much focused not just on, or not at all, on replacing what a human pathologist is doing, but how can the AI system plus the human be significantly better to the human alone? So you really want something with complementary skills to the way humans operate. I think what a lot of people might not realize, and what is rather shocking given the world we live in and the conference did about all the future ways of using AI, is to think about if any one of us were to get a tissue biopsy, like a piece of your skin removed, your prostate removed, your breast removed, your lung removed. So perhaps the most important interpretation of a complex specimen that you will have in your life, where the interpretation of that will determine, maybe you're totally fine, or maybe you have a disease that will kill you or require you to have things like radiotherapy and chemotherapy, so something extremely difficult. The way it will be analyzed today really hasn't changed a lot in decades. And the piece of tissue will be sent to a lab and will be embedded in wax, and thin 5-micron sections will be cut off. And then there will be these images comprised of hundreds of thousands of cells that will just be looked at by a human expert using a microscope, not even digitized. And their interpretation of a pattern of hundreds of thousands of cells on a tissue will determine the definitive diagnosis and the subsequent treatment decisions. So we're way behind where AI is today in this field, where more than 90% of the interpretations are being done just on a microscope. So then you're like, okay, well, how can we use AI plus manual scoring to be significantly better? And to your question on ChatGPT, so we know it's very good at, when prompted, sounding like, at least superficially, like a pretty competent human. So a stat that's thrown around a lot is, it's 80% of an expert, or it's pretty good, which is shocking that you can give it some unstructured prompt and get a pretty decent response. So this is like a pretty decent human, but we all know its error modes. They're very clear. It sometimes makes things up. It's not deterministic. So the same input doesn't always produce the same output. And it can be very difficult to tell when it's giving a correct answer or an incorrect answer. So in essence, the problems with humans reviewing images are very similar in the sense of a problem. Sometimes someone will give a confident diagnosis when they're actually not confident. And sometimes people aren't very reproducible, both agreeable with themselves or agreeable with someone else. So you want a tool that essentially has strengths that are the exact opposite of the weaknesses of things like large language models, and you want deterministic systems where the same input always produces the same output. That's not to say machine learning is not useful. It's just to say that generative AI, particularly driven by large language models, is unlikely to be the core technology that really helps solve this problem. But luckily, machine learning has also in the past decade come up with technologies that are very, very good at these problems. And that is things like vision transformers and classification models that are very, very good at examining with incredible resolution very, very large images. So machine learning will be very useful, is going to be very impactful. We can talk more about that. But it's actually not this ChatGPT use case, because to some degree that has the exact problems we're looking to fix, where we're looking for a system that's deterministic, accurate, and super rigorous.
So I want to build a little bit on what you're saying and basically say that, and we had this wonderful conversation with Sam and with everyone earlier, basically talking about how in some way, and in fact, maybe Sam, you can address that. So you could basically say, oh, great, ChatGPT is just going to read the entire literature and extract meaning from every one of these papers using language, and it doesn't need to bother with all of the rest of the stuff in the paper. So I think what we talked a lot about is, how close is that to actual science? Could you elaborate?
Yeah. Maybe to build on what you said and what Andy said, there's two aspects of machine learning that I see happening. There's a core technology, as Andy said, that is not ChatGPT. It has similarities, it has commonalities with ChatGPT in terms of the underlying algorithms and paradigms that are used to learn from the data. And there's ChatGPT, which is a very, very powerful language tool that is sort of arrived with very fascinating capabilities. And it can really make the process of doing science a lot more efficient today. And Olis was talking about how it's making a lot of the process that he does around science more efficient. And there's a lot of things from IP, from synthesizing scientific literature, from looking at clinical studies, from getting data from sources that you might not know or you might not be that close to, because biology has so many different flavors of expertise. And then there's the core stuff that, my team, I'm head of machine learning, a team of 20 people. We are focused on researching how to make machine learning models a lot better at designing proteins, and specifically in this case, designing these viruses that we are working with. And the difference between this, as I said before, it took 50 years, more than 50 years of trying to do it without AI and failing. because you could only have a human process that much information, that much data from experiments. And what AI is enabling now for us to do is to actually design a company around its capabilities and gather a lot of data at once, millions of data points that you cannot show to a human and make them make sense of it. But if you have these models that are based on the same principles, the same models that can learn the entire internet and then start giving coherent answers, they can also be trained on a lot of data in biology and start giving you insightful answers. But the problem is with biology, it's harder to validate. In the internet, when a language model tells you a sentence that's not correct, you can at least tell that the sentence is not making sense. But in biology, you have to go do $1 million experiment to figure out that one thing that it spit out, whether you can verify it or not. So that's a challenge that us in biology have to deal with, that it's harder than language people. And why I'm being paid for, so that the shots that we take, the very few shots that we have and take, not all of them are garbage. So that's the trade-off we have to deal. So I just want to rephrase the end. There's core and there's language models, and both of them have their role, but we are researching the core stuff. It's not there yet. And the language models, they have a lot to offer today to a lot of different dimensions that you've been hearing around today as well.
So Sade, basically, a lot of us are basically thinking about how do we develop this for the next, 10 years, 15 years, 50 years. And a lot of what we do in academia will sometimes be translated very, very fast. Other times will take decades to get there. You're faced with a very different problem. You have patients coming in, and how do you balance the sort of use of ready-made existing tools and the development of technologies that might just not be ready? So can you tell us a little bit about sort of the discovery process and the translation process, because that's something that's very unique in what we're doing.
So when you look at the long term, what I want to see is that what is not going to change rather than what is going to change. What is not going to change in healthcare is that any model, I don't care about the architecture or what is the underlying technology on it. You want to have, at least on the diagnosis side, you want to have three main characteristics of that model. One, as Andy mentioned, it should be consistent. If I feed the same data 10 times, I want to get the exact same output 10 times. The second one is the explainability. In healthcare, I do want the perfect, very high accurate model, but I want that model to be explainable. So it can give me the reason why I made that decision, because this is a very important thing to do, because otherwise, how am I going to trust? Because it's a sensitive thing when I say, okay, put the crown on this tooth, and if the dentist doesn't ask me anything, why you are suggesting that, and they just go and drill out the tooth, they just ruin the perfect healthy tooth. This is the second one. And the third one is that it should be evidence-based, which means that it should point you to the part that it made that decision. So it is recommending the treatment plan. In our case, your tooth number 13 needs to get the crown. Why? Because I saw the old filling. Under that old filling, I see a decay. And these decays are visible in this image, and this note from the hygiene. That's the reason that I make a decision. I recommend this kind of treatment plan. So these three are the core things for any sort of model that can be used for the healthcare: consistency, explainability, and evidence-based.
Now, it's totally not a competition, but we're winning. There's 0 questions upstairs, and we have 5 questions down here. So any of you, please scan these codes and ask more questions. And we now have some pretty amazing questions already from the audience. So, Andy, how do you detect and prevent errors for models with such complicated inputs and outputs? Diagnostic images, gene sequences in production?
Yeah, it's a great question. And And that's both the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity. And I think it's always good to start with the baseline, which is what errors do we tolerate today, and then how do we reduce that with AI. So the issue is the standard of care today, it's not feasible to get the error rate significantly lower without machine learning, without digitization. And the task that, in our case, pathologists are being asked to do on the images is to look at a stack of 100 slides, each slide containing 100,000 or more cells per slide. And there's just simply not enough time in the day for every pathologist to look at every single example. So we tolerate error rates of 20%, 30%, and those haven't changed in the literature for certain difficult to diagnose diseases. And for easy ones, the error rates are very low and the AI is very low. So I think baselining is really, really important. And then how do we prevent errors? I mean, a few ways. Just the generic machine learning answers, which happen to be true, are nothing beats training on a diverse and large data set by having very, very large amounts of unlabeled data that you can use to inform things like vision transformers and foundation models that will then be very useful across a diverse range of images. But then in our case, since it is a supervised classification task at the end of the day, to have a very, very large labeled data set and to train on a very diverse cohort, and then to implement this in real life, and then to continue to get better over time through incorporating feedback from users is incredibly important. And that's why we can say with confidence, machine learning driven pathology in the future will be better than pathology today. And you simply couldn't say that before machine learning was being used, because errors will exist, but that error rate will go down over time. And good training data set, good ways of learning machine learning, and really important is monitoring not only in the development, but also post-distribution. And I think as we get more and more usage, the error rate will continue to go down. And the other really important piece, which I haven't said, but perhaps the most important, but I'm going to go back to my very first statement, is human and expert pathologists, trained pathologists, are the special control. So the way that you reduce error is you don't take them out of the loop anytime soon, if ever. Because the only reason you would take them out of the loop is if you think they're actually producing more errors than preventing. And if we work correctly with them and we train them on how to use the systems, they should be having a positive or neutral influence, certainly not a negative influence, for many, many years to come.
So you should also know that you're not just going up there to ask questions, you're going up there to also upvote questions. So the most upvoted question right now is what I'm going to be asking. So if you want to sort of have questions asked, upvote them. So we now have 5 upvotes for how can we overcome the systemic reasons for poor tech adoption in healthcare, especially large systems, regulation, misaligned incentives, politics, etc. I mean, frankly, I don't know how I would answer that question, but someone...
I can take a shot at it and probably not take it with a grain of salt. It's just my own perspective, and I don't work at a large pharmaceutical company, and I've never worked there. We have worked with some partners that we are very happy with. Even this last week, we announced a partnership with Roche, and which is an amazing, really large corporation. The way I see it as a sort of evangelist of a lot of the modern tech to bigger partners that we work with is the burden is on us. If the technology is so good that it's going to solve their problems, they're going to adopt it. The problem is we often oversell a lot of the technology, and they actually need to do real experiments, spend real money, and then deal with really high risk in clinical trials to figure out that we were wrong. So I think the burden really is on us. It's frustrating, I understand. And I am not denying that there is like a lot of regulatory and different other aspects of things that could be better. But from my point of view, the thing that is very clear to me is if you put a solution in front of them that's really good, they're going to adopt it. It's mostly a us problem.
Yeah, plus one. I just want to say I totally agree. And usually you don't hear that answer, but I 100% think that's the answer. And we're seeing it. If there really is financial return on investment, more efficiency, improved quality, improved safety, the regulators are going to love it, because the only reason they exist is to ensure that new devices are safe and effective. And if the data shows that, they will approve it. Physicians will adopt it if it improves quality and at least the financial return on investment is at least neutral. So 100% agree. I think it's on us.
And I just want to put a kudos and thumbs up for the FDA. The FDA has been extraordinarily forward-looking with AI, with algorithms, with methodologies that are not just, oh, do exactly this in exactly this case, but more like, oh, if this, then that, and if that, then this, and so on and so forth. So they're really on our side. They're really sort of helping progress. They're really sort of helping us along. So as you say, it's, we're all in this together. I don't know if you want to add a few things.
Yeah, and if you know about the PCCP, the predetermined change control plan,
Exactly.
before that, until 2012, most of the machine learning algorithm-based detections that they were going through the 510K clearance path. They were traditional machine learning. So you are not going to change that model that often. But after the 2012, when the deep learning algorithms are coming through these applications, and the first one that got cleared was around 2016, people understand the limitations of the current process of the 510K was that you need to delimit it. You know that the deep learning algorithm, you need, when you see the new data, when you get the new data and you get the distribution, you have the distribution drift, all those issues, and you want to update your model. It's a pretty easy thing to do. You just need to train your model on the new data set. But then when you update your model, because you already cleared for with 510K, you cannot push that in the production because you already cleared for the older model. Now that we have this PCCP, that the regulatory branch, they provided introduced that 2 years ago. They worked with the people in the industry, and now we have 36 cleared, FDA cleared one of them. We just cleared one of them at Overjet three months ago. That you predetermine the changes. You say that you agreed on the changes that are going to introduce. You say that, okay, I am going to introduce these changes eventually when I get more data from the outside, and then I update my model, and I'm going to go through these process, do these testings and these conditions. If I pass all of those, I put that filing, I put it in my cabinet, and I'm going to push it to I can send it for the production, and they can use it. So these kind of evolvement that are happening is really helping the industry.
So we are now at 15 questions. So we're going to combine the top three, and I'm going to take a first stab at answering them, but these are really complicated ones, so I need your help, guys. So first is, how do you envision the healthcare industry in 10 years with AI supplementation? Tiny topic, so we're going to combine it. How do you foresee physicians using AI in the future? Also tiny. And then the tiniest of all is, how do you handle fear of losing jobs or over AI solution-wide adoption? Okay, so these are, needless to say, the elephants in the room. And thank you for asking them. No wonder they are the most upvoted questions. So I want to be a little provocative here and say that we humans have extraordinary intuition. Why? Because that's how our brain works. We have been combining language and images and sort of, all of our thoughts and knowledge. And kids are able to sort of answer things intuitively. And then we spend about 20 years of our education learning how to think like a robot. Learning how to think, oh, in this case, I only do that. And with mathematics, I only have one solution. And with this, I only have that. And to do long division, I do this. And to diagnose a patient, first I check this, then I check that, then I check this. So this is very non-human-like. And replacing trained humans to act like machines with machines is actually very easy. It's natural. That's what machines are best at. So basically, first checking this, and then checking that, and then checking that. A machine can do it much better than us. So what I want to have us think of instead is this the best we've got as humans? Is this the best we've got in 2024, in the age of big data, in the age of whole genomes, in the age of extraordinarily deep diagnosis, medical imaging, healthcare records, long histories, and so on and so forth? Can any human incorporate all of that data in their decision-making? So the question that I have for you is, who in their right mind as a doctor would want to continue 2002 practices in 2024. And the challenge that I have for all of us is, how do we not replace humans with machines that do just as bad and old-fashioned as humans, but instead, how do we replace the current generation of doctors with doctors that use every possible tool and every data set in their arsenal to go well beyond the traditional regimented algorithms? And why do we have these regimented algorithms? Because otherwise you end up with intuition-based diagnosis, and that's problematic when you haven't examined all the evidence. So at least in my view, we are at the infancy of our field, and the transformation that we're about to see is going to be extraordinary, not just for patients, but also for doctors and for providers and for insurances and for the overall health of our population. So I see this as an enormous opportunity. And I see, of course, as you can imagine from my answers, the healthcare of the future with AI and physicians working side by side. Not, I'm going to offshoot it because I'm just too busy and I have too many patients, but let's look at all of the data together. And I can imagine the doctor and the patient sitting side by side and sort of examining the evidence and saying, okay, what about this? What about that? Oh, and it turns out that your aunt has this thing. Have you talked to her later? Oh, I haven't even met her, but let's talk to her, etc. I can imagine sort of this evidence hunting as a group activity to truly get at a much deeper diagnosis. And that's something where AI will be extraordinarily powerful. It's something where humans will be completely irreplaceable, because you never want the burden of responsibility to an AI. And frankly, the companies that are making the AI systems don't want that burden either. They want humans at the end of the loop. So don't fear for the job of physicians. They're still going to be there. But fear for the quality, be more concerned about the quality of service, which in my view will be dramatically improved. So take it away, guys.
Well, there are so many different questions there, but maybe I'll give the one about the vision for where, assuming all these tools continue to really get a lot better, what will medicine look like and what's going to change and what isn't going to change. I think what's interesting, what won't probably change, everything that's just pure information processing, either behind the scenes or that the patient is dealing with, I think will be impacted. And AI, I think, could be so much more useful. I mean, the most broken thing I think any of us know for healthcare is the idea of waiting 3 months to get an appointment. Then you go in, then you on paper fill out the little questionnaire about all this information that they probably already have. And then a physician who is super rushed and doesn't have much time looks at that questionnaire you just filled out. They've had no time to look through the whole EHR. They've had no time to look in the medical record or to look online for latest results. And then you have like 15 minutes with them to tell you something, and then they refer you to some other physician, and you have to wait another 3 months. Like, the whole system is very, very broken in terms of the way the information is processed and how inefficient and ineffective it is. And I mean, to some degree, that's why we can spend so much money and not see improved outcomes. So much of that stuff could be done like at home, where, you have at-home care, you have some AI system, you do a blood test, the blood test comes back. So I think a lot of the patient monitoring and managing disease at home will be incredibly useful and driven by AI systems. The things that I think won't change include all of the interventional things on humans. I can't imagine robots getting that good in that amount of time. All the care that nurses do, all the care that physicians and surgeons do and actually operating, they'll be assisted by robots and by AI. But I think in terms of intervention, there's going to be a huge need for physicians and physicians' assistants and nurses there. And I think on diagnostics, like what we're working on, I think this is a perfect area that can largely be totally transformed with AI, because it's essentially purely information processing. Tissue comes in, correct diagnosis goes out. So I think AI is going to be very transformative in all the information processing pieces, but the pieces that actually require other humans to be like manually dealing with humans, which is a lot of healthcare, I don't see those changing a ton.
I'll change the question I'm answering a little bit. So I agree with a lot of Andy said here and Manolis. My field, which is gene therapy, I think about it sort of like how surgery was maybe 100 years ago. I assume, I'm not a historian of surgery, but I assume when people decided whether they needed surgery, they thought a lot harder 100 years ago than they did now, because the risks were higher. The diseases that were worth getting a surgery for were fewer. They really sometimes were life-threatening. And gene therapy today is much like that. It's a treatment for diseases that the patient has a few years left, many times much less than that. What we are hoping with this more specific design of gene therapy and reducing its side effect, today when a patient goes in, they get a bag of virus injected into their bloodstream, and their immune system very reasonably freaks out, and this can cause very bad side effects. So we are trying to make it very specialized, so if it has to go to the brain, it only goes to the brain. And my hope is in the next 20, 30 years, maybe a little longer, you would be able to do more and more diseases that can be solved by genetic material being delivered to particular cells. You can call it a genetic transplant that can help you be much better at solving a lot of diseases. And eventually you might get to elective problems as well. Again, ethical aspects of it aside, as a society, people then can decide whether it's worth it or not. But that's the aspect that I think AI is enabling. The thing about doctors, obviously, I would say something very basic. Manolis, I think you're okay. Anyway, something very basic is that not all doctors are the same. Radiologists and neurosurgeons are different people, and different aspects of their job is going to be impacted by AI more or less. One history lesson sort of from AI is it was much faster for us to beat the best human chess player than make robots that would move the chess pieces. And that's the same story with a lot of surgeons. I actually, one of the things I joke about is the last job that I think will get replaced by AI is a barber, because it takes so much tactile dexterity and there's so many different hairstyles and everyone wants their own thing and it's cheap. So no one has the incentive to do that. So I think especially with procedures and intervention, stuff, in general, doctors are going to be fine. I'm not worried about them. They're going to have a better time, not worse.
So Suja, who I love dearly, tells me that it's time. It's crazy. We have 17 questions, my friend.
You're running into the maybe people will leave you at 6.
Oh, great. We have 17 minutes.
Mark to that. Winners for the research.
Can we take 5?
Last question. That's it.
All right. So last questions. So everyone, I really encourage you to go and look at the questions because they're extraordinary. And we should probably, after the AV people leave, just have a great panel discussion. We'll come back here and bring pizza or something. So the last question is, what are the big technological challenges? Basically, my thinking is that, again, I started my introduction with language is relatively simple. Humans invented it. Biology is ridiculously complex. It has been tinkering for billions of years. And we now have, genomes, we have networks, we have cells, we have systems, we have neurons, it's just extraordinarily complex. Do you think humans will actually ever be able to sort of, even with the help of AI, actually figure out biology, actually figure out the mechanistic basis for all of these pathological signatures that you're finding, for understanding the impact of these nucleotides that we're editing with gene editing, for understanding the diversity of lesions that you see in your images?
No, it's a dynamic system and you learn one thing and intervene somewhere and then something else happens. So I think there'll always be problems to solve and new diseases that pop up, and the longer we live, the more complex things will come. So I think it'll be an endless stream of new problems, but we'll get better and live longer.
One sentence: for more diseases than today. It's not a very interesting sentence. We will be finding out more diseases, mechanisms, more diseases using AI, but it's not a panacea.
What I think is that rather than finding the relation in the language model, you find the relation between the embeddings. In the biology, we are trying to find the best embedding representation that can convey the information. So that's what I think we can try and find that perfect embedding, so we can use eventually to solve some equation.
And as the professor in the room, I'll say that I'm so excited about the next 50 years of AI research, not the next 2 or 3. A lot of people are saying, oh, we're going to be done with problems in 5 years. AI will solve it all. This is ridiculous. If we had 100 times more researchers right now, we'd still be 100 years away from solving biology, from solving physics, from solving the natural world, from solving energy and all of that. So I think that we're in this for an awesome ride. I think we're at the beginning of something amazing. I think AI is unleashing a new era of humanity. And I think we're all in this for an amazing, amazing ride that's going to be truly transformative for the human condition and, frankly, for the universe. I think this is just an extraordinary time for humanity. So let's go upstairs and let's change the world.
Manolis, one yes or no, does AI replace professors in the next 50 years?
It's about time. They're way overrated.